everyone, my name is Yuliia and you're watching Multicultural's Community Hour. Today we're joined by Rebeck. He has been active in the labor movement for over 30 years. Kevin was re-elected president of Manitoba Federation of Labour for a fifth term in 2022. Hello Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure being here.
Today we're going to talk about the importance of Manitoba's labor movement and its role in making Manitoba a better place for living and improving working conditions and protecting people's rights. So let's start, and first of all I want you to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about you for listeners who might not be familiar with you.
Sure, my name's Kevin Rebeck. I'm president for the Manitoba Federation of Labour. I've been doing that for 14 years and counting now. I'm born and raised in Manitoba, Ukrainian-Canadian heritage, and I'm very glad to join the show.
I would like to talk to you about Ukrainian-Canadian heritage, but today we will focus on MFL. So can you tell us more about the Manitoba Federation labor movement and why it is important for you?
Yeah, the Manitoba Federation of Labour is a coordinating body for Manitoba's unions. And really we bring and give voice to workers, whether they're in a union or not. Because what we do at the Federation of Labour is we advocate for stronger protections for workers in health and safety, stronger employment standards for more worker rights, and stronger legislative changes that help working families. So we're often a critic of government, pushing them to do better and more to have a strong, vibrant, middle-class workforce.
You have devoted a big part of your life to making Manitoba a better place for living. Why did you decide to start this? Why it was so important for you?
Yeah, well, I joined the workforce at 18 at the Workers' Compensation Board, where I became a union member. And I learned right away that being a union member had some significant advantages. It meant I had rights in the workplace. It meant I had recourse if my rights weren't being respected and followed. And I thought that was really interesting. So I got involved in my union. And they got invested in me. They provided free training and opportunities for me to grow. And I gave back, which meant acting as a shop steward, which kind of defends workers' rights in a particular workplace. And that took me right away into a bigger world, where I joined the provincial executive of my union. I got active and involved. I started facilitating courses. And I found out not only could we make changes in our own workplace, but we could fight for changes on the political stage to make changes for all workers. And I thought that was an exciting and fascinating thing. And I've had the good fortune to be elected into a role where I can continue to advocate for worker rights.
It's been a long journey for you.
Yeah, I've been active now 30 years in the labor movement, so it's been a very long but interesting journey where I've got to do lots of great things and make a real difference in people's lives.
What is the best experience have you got in this organization?
Yeah, I think one of the best experiences is how well people support one another and empower one another for change. And some of the legislative changes we made. I'm particularly proud that in Manitoba, through the work of our Federation of Labour and working with our MFL Women's Committee, we were the first province to successfully advocate and implement paid domestic violence leave for workers. So that when someone's in a situation at home where they're facing domestic violence, often their time and their money is closely monitored. So the ability to have paid time to go and get a restraining order, or to make new childcare arrangements, or to see a counselor, or take steps to get yourself safe is an incredibly important thing, and it can make a real difference in people's lives. And Manitoba, through the advocacy of our MFL Women's Committee, were the first ones to get that in place in the country. And it since has been modeled and reflected pretty much across the land.
That's cool. I think other provinces have to learn from us.
Yeah.
And where do you think stand in Winnipeg in terms of the labor movement?
Well, the labor movement's been having a tough go since the Pallister-Stephenson government came into power. They've taken steps to make life harder for working families. They made it harder to join a union as one of their first acts. And then they passed legislation that restrained and dictated the outcomes of bargaining. We ended up in court over that over a course of several years. And we did manage to win some real wage increases for workers that they otherwise wouldn't have got if we hadn't challenged government and called them to task on their regressive legislation. We're all feeling the rising costs of inflation and the price going up at the gas pumps and at the grocery stores. And workers need to be able to keep up and get ahead. But it seems and feels like our provincial government is more interested in the wealthy getting ahead than workers like you and I. So it's been a tough go, but we're optimistic that there's a brighter future ahead. We're looking forward to this fall's election, where we're hopeful we can see a change of this government and that we can see a government that is interested in investing in our public healthcare system and investing in restoring public services and making sure that the public sector is there for all of us when we need it.
You've been active in labor movement since you were 18. How has it changed during this time? What's the biggest difference between labor movement in 2010 or so and 2023?
Yeah, well, I think like everything in the world, technology has really changed things on how people communicate, on how we're able to reach others, on how we're able to talk about issues, and that's been both good and bad. On the good note, it means we're connected more closely than ever before and we can communicate things quickly. On the bad note, I think we're seeing a rising level of extremism when it comes to politics in particular, and that people are able to tune into just an echo chamber of themselves and not be part of a broader political discourse and discussion. And that's a bit troubling. I think we're looking south to the States and seeing how much hate is rising out of that kind of extremism. And we're seeing it start to peak up here. In Brandon recently, there was a push to ban books that talked about sexuality. Fortunately, there was a huge push, and Labour was a big part of that in pushing that back in a way, so they didn't end up banning those books. But I think the extremism that we're seeing coming up is a big challenge that Labour's needing to figure out how to tackle today.
Is it a biggest challenge for us at the moment?
I think it is the biggest challenge. I think we're all seeing it. We're seeing folks who just want to advocate for their own point of view and want to turn a deaf ear to anyone who has an opposing view. And that's not healthy for anyone, even for the ones who get their way. A just society, a fair society is one that makes sure all voices are heard and that we can find some middle ground where people can win and move ahead together. But we're seeing less and less of that on the political stage these days.
What support do we need from government, from politicals, to make every voice heard?
Yeah, well, I think governments need to be listening to the electorate. And, in Manitoba, we've been pretty loud and clear that we want to see investments in our public services, that we want to see our healthcare system be there for us. But then we hear from our government that they're sending back reports that don't have enough privatization in the report, and that they're having trouble recruiting people because they've been treating them so badly and disrespecting them. So we need a government that actually listens to the people they represent and makes sure it's meeting the needs of folks. And today, in this day and age, we need to help one another and work collectively to make sure services are there for everyone when they need them.
The work the Manitoba Federation of Labour do is very important for all of us, for all of our province. You launched many different programs. Which one of the programs you believe had the most success?
Oh, that's a tough question. Well, I really think, people don't always appreciate that when the labor movement's active and involved and vibrant, that everyone moves up, that our whole society moves ahead. When there's more unionized workers in a country, its overall economy does well, and that there's a larger and bigger middle class. And that seems to be lost in the discussion in this day and age. In Canada, there was a recent study where on average, a union maker doing similar work to other people doing the same types of job make up to $5 more an hour. And that means that they have $5 more to spend in the local economy, to support local businesses, to invest and spend that money locally, as opposed to sending that off to corporate profits that don't stay in the region where they operate. So I think, unions themselves are the most important program that we're supportive and work with, and that we really need to create more opportunity for people who would like a union to be able to have one, free of intimidation and interference from employers who all too often don't want people to have a union because they know it might hurt their profits at the expense of people having a full and vibrant life and being able to invest in the community.
How to become a member of a union?
So there's really two ways you become a member of a union. One is you get hired at a workplace that already has one, and unless there's a majority of workers who want to get rid of a union, which almost never happens, even the most vocal critic of unions, once they have the benefits of a collective agreement, almost never want to give that up. Or if you don't yet have a union and you're in a workplace where you feel you're not being treated fairly, or you're not being respected, or you're not being paid fairly, then you and other workers can indicate that you'd like to join a union. You can call our federation and we'll refer you to some of the unions that you might want to consider, and they will have you sign some cards saying you'd like to do that, and then the labor board can conduct a vote. Now, employers aren't supposed to interfere in those votes. It's illegal for them to do so, but sadly all too often they do. So we'll do our best to guide you through that process, and if a majority of workers would like to have a union in the workplace, they have the right to have that union there.
What is the biggest advantage of being in a union?
The biggest advantage of being in a union is you have some democracy at work. You know, the reality is that the boss, the employer, holds all the power in a regular workplace. When a union exists, then they are able to negotiate a collective agreement, which is really a set of rules that will operate at work. It means that if you and I do the same job, we'll get the same pay. It means that we'll agree on what those steps are. It doesn't let a boss just pay favorites and decide that even though we do the same job and I was hired after you, that I'm going to get $10,000 more a year because we're related in some way or something like that. It means that if those rules aren't being followed, that there's a grievance process. There's a way to raise those concerns and have them addressed. And it means a third party, if necessary, can come in and help sort that out to make sure that the terms of an agreement that we say we'll follow are respected and followed. That means a lot to workers.
Right. And for people who are still thinking and cannot decide whether they do or need to, whether they need or not to join the union, what would be your message to them?
Yeah, well, it is a personal choice. I think people can get ahead a lot better when we work together. We know that together we're stronger.
Yeah.
That's what unions are all about. It's about collective action. Some people are critics. They don't like the seniority clause that says, you know, if I was hired before you, I might get an opportunity or a preference for a promotion before you. So they really don't like unions because of that. Others might say that we're outdated and not necessary anymore. But I look at society today. I look at the growing disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And I would say unions are needed now more than ever. We're needed to provide that balance, that voice, that democracy, and that fairness at work. But if people are being treated fairly by their employer, then maybe they don't need a union, and that's fine too. People often think that unions only want to look out for themselves. No, unions want to look out for workers and make sure that they're being treated fairly and with respect and better. And if you already have that at work, then you don't need a union, and that's just fine.
What actions and decisions need to be taken for a positive future on improving working conditions and protecting people's rights?
Well, I think we need to dispel a bunch of myths that are out there, right? People have this impression that, oh, if you join a union, someone else is going to make you go on strike and go without a paycheck, which simply is not true. But the big challenge we face today is that people make these statements with no facts to back them up and just assert that they're true, and they talk amongst themselves and build up this dialogue that they start believing things are true. So I think we need to find a way to have honest debates and discussion. We can agree to disagree on things, but we need to also fact check some things and make sure that we're being honest about what kind of arguments we're putting forward or what kind of accusations we're making of one another. People should really talk about what they can provide as opposed to spread lies about what others can't.
Yeah, I think and only working together we really can make big changes.
Absolutely. I mean, by coming together, workers have made tremendous growth. A lot of the legislation that people see today, the whole Health and Safety Act, employment standards, are a result of workers organizing together, often through unions, but coming together and saying what their challenge or problem that they need fixed and proposing solutions. And when we can be collaborative and work together, we can make great things happen.
What are your hopes for treatment of workers in the near future?
Well, I'm really hopeful that this provincial election will see a change of government and that we'll have a government that wants to respect and work with working people, that wants to respect collective bargaining, that wants to invest in services that people need, that wants to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, that wants to give people paid sick days so that, today over half of Manitobans have no paid sick time whatsoever. So I think we need to see that a government will be responsive and enhance rights and respect for workers.
Is there a province in Canada with better understanding of workers and their needs and what we can learn from these provinces?
Yeah, well, I look to BC right now that has an NDP government that has implemented paid sick days, that often strikes committees or structures that include business, yes, but also employee representatives, union representatives who are able to sit at a table and give advice to government and find ways to move their economy forward, but in a way that builds up worker rights as well as their economy.
Yeah, I hope in the near future Manitoba will be on the first stage in terms of labor movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm optimistic that things can change for the better for all workers in Manitoba.
What future programs or services do you want to implement in the near future to achieve it?
Yeah, well, I'd really like to see some sort of Bill of Rights created for the gig workers. More and more people are working for these Ubers or they're deemed contract workers, where they aren't really contract workers. They're beholden to a single employer, but the employer has classified them in a way that allows them to not give them the rights that typical workers have under employment standards. And I think we need to see our laws change to not let employers get away with shirking their responsibilities for the workers that they employ. And this gig economy that has been growing across all of the world really needs to have some rights associated with the people who work in that economy so that they are respected, that they are paid fairly, that they have the right WCB and insurance coverage, and employers can't just simply get out of their responsibilities by saying they're contract workers when they aren't.
What is the biggest changes you see when you just started and now?
Everything's been changing in a big way. I think one of the big things is that extremism of right-wing politics and left-wing politics and them growing further and further apart. I think we've seen real wage growth has slowed down and gone negative in some instances, that the middle class continues to shrink. And it used to be when I was growing up that being a millionaire meant you were set for life. And the whole concept of a billionaire was a foreign concept that people didn't even think of. And now the world has hundreds of billionaires. And the rich just keep getting richer while the rest of us struggle to get by. And I really feel that needs to change and that we need to find a way to build our economy up by providing fair wages that provide real growth for people to get ahead when they work hard.
You have said that you want to make sick days paid. How we can do that? Is it possible?
It's completely possible. So right now, little less than half of Manitobans have paid sick days. Typically, if you work for a very large employer, that if you make a very good wage, then you also have these benefits like paid sick time. But the lower paid workers are typically the ones who go without. Also, if you work in hospitality or retail, you're even less likely to have paid sick days. Why? Because it's not required by law. All that needs to change is legislation saying that employers must provide it. The reality is that employers, by and large, will be further ahead, because if we aren't coming to work contagious and sick, we aren't causing other people to get sick in the workplace. And productivity overall will go up, people will feel more respected. But critics think, oh, well, everyone will use every single sick day that they're ever entitled to. I'll tell you, there's a small percentage that may take advantage of that. More likely, if they don't feel respected at work, they might take advantage of that. But the vast majority of people would use it when they're sick and would keep their coworkers and their kids and students and patients and whatever else they're working with healthier too. We learned that through the pandemic. We saw people, the amount of people who had colds or flus almost went non-existent because we weren't spreading those contagions around. That was because when people were sick, they could stay home and protect everyone. But for far too many people, the choice between a paycheck and doing the right thing and staying home when you're sick is no choice at all. They have to go into work just to get by. So we need a law change. It's been done at the federal level. It's been done in BC. It can be done here in Manitoba, and Manitobans deserve it.
If you believe it, if you know how to achieve it, I'm sure in the near future, we all hope that it will happen.
We will see that in our future, I'm certain.
During the COVID, how was the situation and how active was the movement, the labor movement during the COVID?
It was incredibly active during COVID. Everyone's working conditions changed. And if you had a union, your union was very involved in what did that change mean? Did it mean you had preserved some rights to work from home? Did it mean, how did that mean for health and safety? What did that mean for meetings? What did it mean for hours of work and how they got assigned? So unions were incredibly nimble and active throughout COVID. It meant a lot of meetings with government about are there some laws we need to change or give advice to make adaptations to so that people might be on leave longer than the law allows before they'd be laid off. So we made some recommended changes to make sure that those were expanded and didn't cause people to lose their job because the plant had shut down for a time. It was a very active time for unions.
And after the COVID, was it hard to stay active, or people continue these activity all the time?
Yeah, no, things continue all the time. People's workplaces have really gone through a lot of changes, and as people bargain new collective agreements, they want to figure out, are there some of the positive changes that we can keep and allow for some flexibility on when you have to be physically at work and how productive you can be at home and how we can make that new rights in the workplace. People are still kind of dealing with health and safety issues related to that time. Some people are still suffering from COVID and have long-term effects that unions are actively working with them to make sure that their rights are respected and protected.
So Kevin, Manitoba has a lot of immigrants, and we don't know how to reach you. We don't know that you really can help us. We need this help, especially at the first time. How do we can reach you? What support can you provide to us?
Thanks, that's a really good question. There are a lot of newcomers that come to Manitoba, and we're proud and happy to have them here. Sadly though, employers often take advantage of newcomers, which is all the more reason they might need a union or they might need to know where they can get help. So if people are not yet in a union and are interested in learning more, they can call our Federation of Labour or visit us at mfl.ca. Our phone number is on the website, but it's 204-947-1400. We can help them connect to unions to learn more about that. If they have questions about employment standards, like when are they entitled to overtime or what sort of breaks are they entitled to, they can also call Employment Standards, which is a department of government that has a responsibility to make sure employment standards are followed. Or if they're hurt at work, they should put in a WCB claim. So they should call WCB, the Workers' Compensation Board, and there's a process there that should provide for them to, if they need it, have some paid time to get well and work on a safe plan to return to work that they have input to.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for supporting newcomers. Thank you for doing a great job in our province and our community. That's really important, and we hope to see more positive changes in the near future.
Thanks very much. I'm glad to be here. I'm proud of our province. I'm proud of working people, and I think there's much more we can do together.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you our audience for joining us today. We hope you enjoy it. If you like the episode, please like, share, and subscribe to see our upcoming episodes.